Brazil currently has a fascist president by the name of Jair Bolsonaro. And believe it or not, he was actually not the person polling at the top during the election. There was Lula da Silva, who is from the Workers' Party, who actually had a significant lead above Bolsonaro, but he got investigated for alleged corruption. This was part of Operation Car Wash in Brazil, and he was eventually convicted of money laundering and passive corruption. Now, his supporters argued, no, there is a judicial coup happening. Sergio Moro, who is the judge who convicted him, later ended up being Bolsonaro's justice minister. In fact, he's still Bolsonaro's justice minister. So Lula da Silva's supporters had good reason to believe that this was basically a hit job on Lula da Silva. Now, the Intercept has obtained messages among prosecutors, which makes it abundantly clear that they were working together in order to undermine Lula da Silva and get him imprisoned. In fact, when reporters wanted to interview him after he had been convicted, he's already in prison. The Supreme Court in Brazil ruled that journalists could interview him prior to the election taking place. But these prosecutors, using a messaging app known as Telegram, were sending one another encrypted messages in order to prevent that interview from happening, because they knew they ran the risk of da Silva basically letting the world know what was really going on. So let me give you more details on what the Intercept found. Great reporting. The massive archive provided exclusively to the Intercept shows multiple examples of politicized abuse of prosecutorial powers by those who led the country's sweeping Operation Car Wash corruption probe since 2014. Many of these documents show improper and unethical plotting on how to best structure the corruption case against Bolsonaro's opponent, Lula da Silva, although Judge Sergio Moro was legally required to judge the case as a neutral arbiter. Now, it's clear that he was not a neutral arbiter. He was essentially working in favor of Bolsonaro and helping him get elected by ensuring that Lula da Silva would be imprisoned. Once Bolsonaro was elected president, he quickly offered Moro, whose corruption ruling had resulted in Lula's candidacy being barred, a newly created and unprecedented powerful position as what is now called the Super Justice Minister, designed to reflect the massive powers vested in Moro. I have more details, but I want you guys to jump in and share your thoughts.
To be fair, one day I would like to be Super Justice Minister. Justice is in fact coming. And you get a sense of it with things like, we're gonna go after him for passive corruption. And you have to understand, this is one of the oldest tricks in the book. Another guy who did this is Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince in Saudi Arabia. Before he chopped up a Washington Post columnist, what he did was he arrested all of his political opponents in Saudi Arabia, extorted them for money, and when they asked him, well, what are you doing? Why did you arrest all the other princes and all the people that might challenge your political power? He said, I'm weeding out corruption. And so that was an excuse that he used. And then he bought a $500 million boat at the same exact time. So it was kind of an open joke that yes, they're the ones being corrupt. And here it happens again, but this time in Brazil. Now, if you're wondering why is it always the left-wing guys that are deposed and the operations are usually led by the right wing? Because they are more aligned with business interests, so they have more money.
Yes.
So the guys with the money want the guy. And what is fascism? It's a joining of big business and big government. And so they want, that helps their cause. They don't want a left-winger coming in there and disrupting them, ripping off the people of Brazil.
And it's not just that. Yes, there's the funding aspect of it, but it's also what Bolsonaro represents for big business and how Lula da Silva, he lifted tens of millions of people out of poverty, right? He represents the Workers' Party, which sounds, it is exactly what it sounds like it is, right? He focused on the social programs that helped uplift the people of Brazil. And that doesn't jive well for the business interests, for the very people who want to exploit Brazil and its natural resources. And so, Ryan, I've done enough talking. I want to hear from you.
Well, yeah, and to your point, when he left office the last time, he left with something like an 87% approval rate.
Right.
And he was polling ahead in this presidential election even after he was put in prison. From prison, he was beating the entire field. which goes to the point that we talk a lot about here, which is that it's not that the country was divided whether they wanted a fascist or a center-right candidate. It was actually socialism or barbarism. It was the second choice was a fascist. The first choice was a socialist, somebody who was delivering for the people. The rest of the kind of center-left in Brazil had become too associated with neoliberalism and the kind of coastal elites of that country, and so they didn't have the credibility that Lula had. Haddad, the Workers' Party candidate, who then replaced Lula, well, it just wasn't a Lula, and just didn't have the kind of oomph to be able to compete with what barbarism was offering. And so it does go back to the thing that we're always saying, that if you want to combat the right, you really need a robust left. But this is just like you said, it's an insane story. The way that these prosecutors have gotten awards all over the world.
That's right.
For these corruption investigations that they did, and to find out that they are what people suspected they were, which is ideological right-wing hacks, is just blowing Brazil to pieces.
And the US media was either complicit or even assisted in the narrative that helped someone like Bolsonaro get elected. For instance, the Wall Street Journal published pieces that seemed to be pretty favorable and complimentary to Bolsonaro, while at the same time, you have this judicial coup taking place in Brazil. And one other thing I wanted to note, and this is directly from the Intercept piece, documents that they obtained, and again, these are the prosecutors communicating with one another on how to undermine Lula. Documents include private admissions among the prosecutors that the evidence proving Lula's guilt was lacking. Overall, the documents depict a task force of prosecutors seemingly intent on exploiting its legal powers for blatantly political ends, led by its goal of preventing a return to power of the Workers' Party generally and Lula specifically. And they even put him in solitary confinement. He's been in solitary confinement. I mean, he is not a violent person, he's not a dangerous person. Bolsonaro, on the other hand, looked at a woman and told her, you're not good looking enough to rape. Okay, he talks about how he would wish death upon one of his sons if he was gay. He's even said that his fourth child, which is a daughter, was conceived in a so-called moment of weakness because she ended up being a girl. I mean, he is a terrible, terrible person. And he has wanted to privatize as much as possible in Brazil. I mean, he is Trump on steroids in a lot of ways.
And he's churning up as much of the rainforest as possible.
That's right.
The clock that is ticking on how much time we have to address climate change, if it's down to 11 and a half years, every day that he's churning up as much of the rainforest as possible brings that much closer. Without that sink, the globe loses its biggest carbon sink.
Yeah, so one last thing here, guys. It's funny because there's a little bit of irony here. It's what Trump is claiming was happening to him. But of course it didn't, because he won the election, right? If it was a left-wing conspiracy, it was poorly executed. And of course there isn't one. And if you look at the text there, they're just like, hey, I don't like Trump, but I don't like Hillary Clinton either, the FBI agents. And there's no text saying, let's make sure that we manipulate the system, and then later the guy who helped do that, Hillary Clinton, will make the Supreme Justice Minister, right? Yeah. None of that happened. So they
didn't put Trump in jail. Like, they literally put the guy in prison.
Yeah, of course. If they were gonna do that, they would have put Trump in jail, and that's how it would have.
Not for lack of crimes.
Yeah, and not for lack of crimes in his case. So, and unfortunately, the mainstream media, and we keep going back to this because it's a pervasive problem, will call things even. But there isn't very much left-wing conspiracies. It's not to say that none ever existed in the world, of course, but there aren't very many today because there's not a lot of money in it, right? Whereas with right-wing conspiracies, if you unfairly imprison Lula and you put Bolsonaro in charge, the people who make money off of churning the rainforest are gonna make a ton of money. The business interests that wanna rob the Brazilian people of their natural resources are gonna make a lot of money. There isn't a lot of money to be made in giving the workers more and giving the citizens more. So that is why a lot of the conspiracies are right-wing, for a logical, money-oriented reason. And also the reason why our right-wing and places like the Wall Street Journal, which are obsessed with the stock market and big business. And who do they favor? Well, they favor the people who are ripping off the Brazilian resources, not the people who are in favor of Brazilian workers. That doesn't play well. So that is why all those forces conspire against people who might actually want to help their citizens.
And finally, Sergio Moro did respond to the Intercept piece, and he is ripping a page off of the right wing's book here in the United States. The Trump administration does this quite often. The sources for the Intercept are anonymous for obvious reasons. And so they're the individuals who turned over these messages between the prosecutors and how they were undermining Lula. And what Sergio Moro, again, this is the judge who convicted Lula, has to say about it is, well, I mean, this is terrible. I mean, these are anonymous sources, and it's disgusting that there are anonymous sources that are leaking this nonsense. This is nonsense, right? He also says, as for the content of the messages they mention, there is no sign of any abnormality or providing directions as a magistrate, despite being taken out of context and the sensationalism of the articles. They ignore the gigantic corruption scheme revealed by Operation Car Wash. We're gonna include a link to the piece in the description box below. I highly recommend you guys read it because it's just an incredible piece that has the evidence to back up what it claims. So please read it, read The Intercept. It's a great organization.
Yeah, what context would justify, hey, let's make up reasons to arrest this guy because he's not letting us rip off Brazil.
And for the judge to be strategizing with prosecutors over how to shape the case.
Exactly.
What? You can't do that.
Of course you can. And so
Super Justice Minister can do it.
Yeah, now the Super Justice Minister can do it. It happens to be the same guy. Look, guys, investigative journalism matters, and so please support great investigative journalism, and in this case, it's The Intercept. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.